All right. Hello, everyone. Anyone out there that has tea samples, go ahead and start your water now. Again, I recommend a side bowl for pouring out any leaves as we go along. So let's get started. Thank you all for joining me on this part one of this 3-part online tea course series. My name is Miles Kramer. I've been working with Dover Tea for the last 10 years, and in that 10 years I've had the opportunity to travel to the tea gardens of China, of Japan, of Thailand, and in that time period I've built a deep passion for tea and a passion for sharing that tea with other people through tea education. So thank you all so much for joining me. And thank you all for all the people out there that have bought tea samples and are going to be brewing along with me. Let's start by just talking about what is tea. So when we refer to tea, we're referring to a beverage derived from the Camellia sinensis plant. This is a Camellia sinensis that I've grown from seed, from Japanese tea seeds I bought from Obuku Valley in Ujitawara. You can find him on Instagram, Obuku Valley. So this is a little baby Camellia sinensis, about 4 months old, very small. So as this continues to grow, this can reach up the size of a giant tree. But usually in the tea gardens, they stay about like a shrub. About 15 to 30 years is generally the size for a tea plant. And so they generally about a shrub. This is just a little baby. But so when we're referring to tea, we're referring to the beverage from this Camellia sinensis. Other things like chamomile, hibiscus, lavender, these can be considered tea in the idea that you are infusing something in water. But for our purposes today, when we refer to tea, we're referring to the Camellia sinensis plant. So let's go ahead and start by getting into brewing our first pot of tea, the Yin Silver Needle. So today I'm going to be using these items right here. First, I have right here my gaiwan, which just means lidded bowl. This is my favorite way to brew tea. It's very versatile. It's just very user friendly. You get to see the leaves when you take off the lid. I love the gaiwan. It's my favorite style. The next we have here is the gongdao bei, or the serving pitcher. This is going to be used for cooling water or taking the infusion to then serve it. And then I have a teacup here. So you don't necessarily need the gongdao bei if your teacup is larger than your gaiwan. Just to keep in mind that when you need to remove the entirety of the infusion each time, so just your cup needs to be larger. But that's why I have this gongdao bei for pouring my infusion to here and then pouring into my cup. Or if you have multiple people, you can then serve this with many different people. So let's move on to the first tea. And the people that have the samples out there, we're going to move on to the Yin Silver Needle White Tea. So when brewing tea, I like to talk about the 4 parameters of brewing. 1 is going to be the weight of dry leaf. 2 is going to be the water temperature. 3 is going to be the volume of water. And 4 is going to be the infusion time. So let's start with the first parameter, weight of dry leaf. So what I recommend for achieving accurate weight of dry leaf is getting a little digital scale. You can get this digital scale on Amazon for about $12 to $15, something like that. They can also be purchased at your neighborhood head shop, but they're generally like $30 to $40 at a head shop. But I've found some really nice ones for about $15 on Amazon. And I highly recommend using a scale just to really dial in your weight of dry leaf here. And then just a little bowl to put your tea into. So let's start with our 4 grams for our weight of dry leaf. So if you don't have a digital scale at home, often the tablespoon is used as a unit of measurement for a serving of tea. The thing about the tablespoon is it can be a little, it's not quite that accurate. And I'll show you, so everyone at home that has the tea samplers, all those tea samplers are all 16 grams. And so, but right here, so this is 1 serving of tea. Right here you have the yin gen, and then right here you have the sencha that we're going to be brewing later in the class today. As you can tell, a tablespoon of this tea and a tablespoon of this tea are going to be not quite the same. But if you don't have a scale, generally a tablespoon is going to be fine. It'll work. But that's again why I recommend the scale to really accurately dial in those 4 grams. So I have my 4 grams here of my silver needle. Just real quick, I want to show you for the people at home that don't have the tea. This is the silver needle. It's just the tips of the tea plant. Just really beautiful. Very low processing in this tea, and just the tips. Just the nice downy tips. Okay, so I have my 4 grams here. And the next parameter is going to be water temperature. So we're going to take our water here. And just to back up 1 second, to always, when I start my tea session, what I like to do is pour a little water into my gaiwan without any of the tea in there. Pour the water into the gaiwan and just run water through each thing to rinse my vessels and to warm the vessels so you can get more of an accurate temperature with your tea. So we'll start here with a little rinse of the vessels. And let's go ahead and begin our water temperature. You'll notice that it says 85 degrees Celsius. We talk in Celsius. That's dramatically, that's a bit below boiling. Water temperature is one of the most, usually the most overlooked aspect of brewing tea for people just getting into tea. When people say, "Oh, I don't really like green tea. It's astringent. It's too bitter." I'm going to usually assume that they are used to putting boiling water on their green tea. And that's going to just release all the catechins too quickly and just scorch the tea and create too much bitterness. So we practice lowering our temperature to the right amount for each tea and to achieve a more mellow, less astringent cup of tea. So here, for this silver needle, we're going to go with 85 degrees Celsius. And I've also introduced the third parameter, the volume of water. And you can see here, this is the volume of water I'm going to use today. It's just about 3 ounces. So the volume of water is going to be about 3 to 6 ounces. I personally generally go a little bit lower. That's just kind of my style. I like a little bit more concentrated cups of tea. But so at the same time here we have we're cooling down to our water temperature, and we have our volume of water, which is 3 to 6 ounces. Okay, so, and to accurately achieve our water temperature, I recommend getting a digital thermometer. This is another great tool for your tea table. So if you have a thermometer at home, go ahead and put your thermometer into your water here, and we'll just kind of check where we're at with our temperature. And so yeah, I'm pretty close here. If your temperature is lower, that's fine. I think lower temperature is better than higher temperature. So I'm sitting here at about 76 degrees. That's fine. Well, that's going to be good for today. So I'm going to take my 4 grams of my leaf and put it in my gaiwan. And now that I have my temp water and my volume of water ready, I'm going to start my 4th parameter, which is infusion time. And infusion time is going to be 1 minute. And the idea here with these tools is that you're doing shorter infusions, so then you do multiple infusions. You're not just doing one long infusion and drinking that and calling it a day. We're doing, in this practice, we're doing shorter infusions and multiple infusions. So we're going to do a 1 minute infusion. To get your time, it's nice to, your cell phone is a great tool for this. So if you're watching on your computer and you're not watching on your cell phone, get your cell phone and go to your stopwatch. And I'm going to go ahead and start the time and pour the water on my leaves. And so as the leaves infuse, what I like to do is take, with the 40 seconds remaining of this infusion, I like to just take a moment and calm my breath and relax into this moment and really enjoy the tea session in a nice calm way. I like to also start to cultivate some love and compassion, sending it into my teapot, into the room around me, and then outwardly into the world around me. Just take this moment of meditation and relaxation. And now, with patience and grace, we'll go ahead and just pour off this first infusion. And so after you pour this first infusion, it's nice to go. I like to experience tea with all the senses and with the sight of the beautiful teaware, and then start with the aroma. And so take off your lid and smell the lid, and smell in the teapot, and just start to get that first introduction of the aromatics of this tea. Just light, fresh, aromatic, spring-like flavors. Yeah, that was a 1 minute infusion to reply to y'all. But yeah, just take in this smell, and it starts to awaken the smell and the taste. And so let's go ahead and look at this first cup here. This is, again, this Yin Silver Needle. Very light, clean, silvery color here. This is a beautiful silver needle here. This is Dobra Tea Silver Needle. Hit up Sarah Delaney right there. She has some silver needle from Rwanda. That's very nice. Hit her up after this stream. But just very clean color. So let's go ahead and taste our first infusion here. Very clean flavor, a little bit of a vegetal note to it. Very light smokiness, but overall just a nice clean, sweet flavor. I personally don't really get bogged down in tasting notes. What I enjoy when I drink tea is noting the experience, noting how, when the tea enters into my body, how does it feel in my body. I feel the uplift from the caffeine, but do I feel a grounding? Do I feel kind of a brightening of my spirit? But it is also nice to focus in on the intricacies of the flavor itself, because all these teas are going to have such drastic, such an amazing array of flavors. A very, very nice, clean cup of tea. Okay, so let's recap the 4 parameters here. The first parameter being the weight of the dry leaf, which was 4 grams. The water temperature, which was 85 degrees, and mine was a little bit lower. The volume of water, which was 3 to 6 ounces. And then the infusion time, which was 1 minute. These parameters can be changed, but they are all connected. If you change one of the parameters, you're going to have to change other ones to achieve achieve what you're wanting out of the tea. How many infusions on the white tea? We'll get to that in a second. It's going to be a lot of infusions. I'll start talking about more infusions here. So with these 4 parameters, you can change them. So if you wanted a lighter cup of tea, and like you're a little sensitive to caffeine, you could lower your parameter of weight of dry leaf to something like 2 or 3 grams. But then I would maybe raise your infusion time. If you wanted a stronger cup of tea, you could do more like 6 to 8 grams of leaf, but then I would lower your infusion time and do shorter infusions. If you wanted to raise your volume of water, like you wanted to make like a gallon of tea, and for iced tea, I would then raise your volume or your weight of dry leaf and raise your infusion time a little bit, so then you can achieve a larger amount of tea. So again, these 4 parameters are adjustable to achieve what you're wanting out of your tea. Because in the end of the day, there are guidelines on how to brew tea, but in the end of the day, the goal is to achieve what you want out of the tea. The only right answer is what you are enjoying. So yeah, so let's move on to our second infusion here. To answer Frank's question here, how many infusions on the white tea? You're going to be able to do this many times, but today we're just going to do 2 infusions of each. So if we steep the tea for more like 3 minutes, we would lower the temperature. I would stay about that, 185, and you just do it for 3 minutes. But if you're going to do it for 3 minutes, I would raise the parameter of volume of water. So I wouldn't do 3 ounces of water. I would do something more like 16. So that's a good point. That's a good way if you're not wanting to do 10 infusions like I like to do. You just do 16 ounces of water, 3 minutes, 185, and you will achieve a larger amount of tea in your infusion. Yeah, that's a good point. So let's move on to our second infusion here, and go ahead and start our water here for that. So one little trick of the volume of water that I like to do is when you start to get accustomed to your gaiwan and your gong dao bei, you start to notice where on your pitcher to pour each time, that you know that you're getting exactly how much water you need for your infusion. You're not pouring too much water in here that you have some left over, or you're not pouring enough. And so I'm finding my pitcher here is about a centimeter above this bottom handle. And that also is a nice trick to cool your water faster. It's quicker to cool smaller amounts of water. So it's a nice little trick that I've kind of learned over the years. So let's check our water here. So for second infusions, I generally like to stay around that same temperature. You can go up a few degrees if you'd like, but I like to go here about 85 degrees. Stay about where we're at. And so I'm about where I need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and just pour my water on for my second infusion. And let's just take one more minute to just drop into this tea session and just calm our breaths and just enjoy the beauty of this moment. And you'll notice I didn't start my timer. Over the years of brewing, I've kind of stopped using timers personally, and I've just started to kind of tap into the leaf and learn how long, just kind of intuitively, how long I'm going to need to go. So I'm feeling as if this tea is ready to be poured. So in this state of relaxation, with calm grace, we're going to go ahead and pour the second infusion out. Yes. Susan asks, are you leaving the previous leaves in the pot? Yes, the leaves are still in here. And so the water leaves these pots. You're going to just continue to brew in this pot and just continually brew. And so we have our second infusion here. And we could continue to brew this 3 to 5. I sometimes brew up to 15 times personally. But I mean, so the idea with these infusions is that you are slowly releasing all of the goodness in the leaf, which you're also slowly releasing the astringency of the tea. So it makes all the infusions nice and mellow. So let's go ahead and enjoy our second infusion here. And so what you're going to notice in the second infusion is it's the body of the tea is a little bit more predominant now, and the astringency of the tea is gone. It's not as present. So you're getting more of the body, and you're getting new tasty notes that weren't present in that first one. So that's a fun thing about these multiple infusions, is that you're getting to experience new tastes through each infusion. Yeah, very, very nice cup of tea. Okay. So, go ahead and I'm going to get my water back up to boil here. And so for those people that are brewing along with me, go ahead and clean out your teapot here. We're going to move on to our next tea, the Bilo Chun. Okay, so as we're moving on to the Bilo Chun, let's talk about what makes each tea different. So as we discussed, all tea comes from this one plant here, the Camellia sinensis plant. And so if all these different teas, the white, green, black, oolong, pu'er, heicha, yellow tea, if it all comes from this one plant, what makes each tea different? So the first thing that we talk about that makes all the different colors of tea, what we call them, the white, green, yellow, black, is going to be oxidation. So when you pick the leaf off the tea plant, the leaf naturally begins to oxidize. The cells start to break down as oxygen comes into the cells. So with this oxidation, the leaves start to dry. And so what they do is they do all these different processes to either control the oxidation, create a full oxidation, or zero oxidation. So that first tea we just drank, the white tea, is a lightly oxidized tea. They're going to pick the leaves, and then they're going to control the drying, and that's going to be basically all the processing. Simply said, they're controlling the drying of the white tea. But there's actually a lot of skill that's involved in making white tea. They need to make sure that the tea doesn't dry too quickly, so there's not enough oxidation. They want to make sure that the leaves don't dry too slowly, so you have too much of oxidation. They need to control the humidity. They need to control the temperature. So in all these parameters, they're controlling the amount of oxidation in these tea leaves to reach the desired amount, and then it will then be in a high heat finish. So white tea is very simply dried, but there's a lot of skill involved. To the other end of the spectrum, we have things like black tea, pu'er, and heicha, where the leaves are fully oxidized. They're disrupting the leaves and allowing the leaves to fully oxidize. And then you have oolong tea, where they are controlling the leaves. They're going to do some heating processes, disrupt the leaves, and just control the oxidation in a way similar to the white tea, but with more production involved. And we'll get into that next week in next week's class. Moving into the next tea, the last two tea we're going to drink today is green tea, which is going to be no oxidation, zero oxidation. So when the leaves are picked, they then go through a heating process to stop the oxidation. In China, they pan fry the leaves. If you go to the post that I made earlier today, maybe do it after the class, but you can see I posted a picture of someone pan frying leaves for bilochun processing. So in China, they pan fry their leaves to arrest the oxidation. In Japan, they're going to steam the leaves. So let's first focus on pan frying tea and move on to, one second, I'm sorry. So that's oxidation, zero oxidation for green tea. Other things that make all the different teas different is varietal. So just like wine, there are hundreds of types out there that make all the different wines. Tea is exactly the same way. There are hundreds of varietals out there, Qingxian in Taiwan, Longjing varietal in China, just many different varietals. A lot of times each region, just like wine, has their own specific varietal that they use. And every day the researchers are creating new varietals to achieve different flavor notes. So these varietals are either small leaf, larger leaf, the leaves are going to be more pale, like the Anji Baicha, or they're going to be darker. And so all these different characteristics of the plant itself are going to produce different flavor profiles in the finished product. Another factor that creates the different teas is going to be terroir. Again, like wine, you have the high mountain terroir of Darjeeling, the low elevation terroir of Kenya, the tropical terroir of southern Yunnan or Vietnam or northern Thailand, and kind of the oceanic terroir of Japan. So all these different regions are going to influence the flavor of the tea plants and then influence the finished product of the tea itself. Another factor of the different teas will be picking grade. Whether you pick just the young bud, whether you pick the one bud to 2 leaves, or 4 leaves, or no buds at all. So just picking grade will also differentiate the flavor, because a bud is going to taste different than the leaf itself. So many different factors and also production steps. So for example, for green tea with the bilochun, when they're pan frying it, they're going to pull the leaves off the wok, where in Longjing, they're going to press the leaves into the wok. Both green teas, but in the end of the day, it's these different steps of processing are going to achieve different flavors. Demetrius says, where does yellow tea fall? So yellow tea is actually green tea, which is unoxidized, and then they're going to wrap the green tea in a cloth, and then they'll steam that cloth to kind of re-moisten the leaves, and then they're going to slowly dry it over charcoal. Again, there's going to be different processing steps for different people producing yellow tea. But so yellow tea is essentially post-fermented green tea. So it's increasingly rare. More and more producers that have produced yellow tea are just stopping that post-fermentation and just selling it as green tea. But yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our next tea, the Bilo Chun. Let's go ahead and get our 4 grams. Our first parameter here are 4 grams of dry leaf. Okay, so I have my 4 grams here. So Bilo Chun is a green tea from the Jiangsu province of China, on a peninsula in the freshwater lake, Taihu Lake. This peninsula goes out into this, and when you enter into Dongshan, you see these mountains rising up out of the peninsula, and all the mountains are covered in fruit trees. They planted all over these mountains, and underneath the fruit trees, you'll find when you get up into the mountains, you'll find the tea trees growing underneath these fruit trees. They say that the fruit trees are infusing some sweetness and fruity qualities to the leaf, and the trees are also providing shade. And one aspect of shade-grown tea that I like to point out is higher levels of theanine. So theanine is a chemical that I like to focus on with tea. We often focus on caffeine as the main chemical in tea. Theanine is a chemical that naturally occurs in tea that actually that creates a calming effect in our body. And so with theanine and caffeine working together, we get this calm, focused stimulation and a more gentle, prolonged stimulation. So theanine is this really amazing chemical found in tea, and higher levels of theanine are found in shade-grown teas. I haven't actually heard a whole lot of studies about the theanine content of Bilo Chun, but just when I was thinking about the fruit trees, I was like, well, okay, so maybe Bilo Chun actually has higher levels of theanine. You most often see theanine talked about in shade-grown Japanese teas. But yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to brewing this Bilo Chun. We have our 4 grams here. Throw it in our gaiwan. And take our water. And start cooling our water. And so I'm going to assume my water is pretty high here. So we're trying to achieve 70 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to show you a little trick on how to cool your water faster. You may not have a second serving pitcher like I do, but if you have like just another mug or cup or something, just some other vessel, we're going to take our water that's being cooled and take the second vessel and just pour it and toss it back and forth. And each toss is just going to lower the temperature just a few degrees, and just with this little bit of water, it's going to cool even faster. So I'm just going to toss that a few times. And so that toss brought me down to where I need to be. So we're going to take this water. And so before we pour this tea, I want to introduce a little brewing trick that I use. So instead of pouring the water straight on the middle of the leaves, they call that breaking the gall. Let's practice pouring the water on the side of the gaiwan. So the water comes down the side of the gaiwan and infuses from underneath. When you pour the water straight on and breaking the gall, you are more aggressively releasing all the catechins and the astringency of the tea. When you pour on the side and let it infuse like that, it's going to be a more gentle infusion of the fresh leaves. And it'll just create a sweeter flavor rather than an astringent flavor. So as we pour our water here, let's take our water and just aim for the side. And so there may be with this method, there may be some leaves that will still be floating on top that aren't saturated. You can just kind of gently push those down in there. And as always, let's just take another moment to just relax as this tea infuses. I often like to time my infusions by my breaths. So 2 or 3 breaths is usually about a minute. So I'm going to say this is ready to go. And we're going to go ahead and pour our infusion out. And as always, right before you drink this, go ahead and just open the lid, smell the lid, and smell your cup here. So we're getting a little bit more astringency on the nose, a little bit more smokiness to it, a little bit more intricate flavors than aromas than that white tea. And with my infusion here, you're seeing a little bit darker color, but still very light, a little bit more golden than silvery, and then a little bit of viscosity in there. The viscosity is coming from the downiness of these leaves. So let's go ahead and enjoy this infusion. So a little bit more vegetal, kind of a green bean quality to it, a little bit more smokiness, but very nice. Bye, Allie. Yeah, very nice. And so I think I saw Ray say something about this earlier. Yeah, let's on this tea, I think it's good to practice some sipping techniques. Ray talked about slurping helps to really open up the flavor of this. I like to pull the liquor into my mouth and just kind of swish it around. Let the tea reach all parts of your mouth and really let the aromatics dance in your mouth. And don't just chug it down. Just really take some time to let the tea sit. Make a slurp like that, pulling the tea across your tongue to really get a lot of that of the aromatics. If you choke when you slurp, it's okay. I've done it many times as well. Cool. Let's go ahead and do one more infusion here. Let's go ahead and start our water to cool here. And as we're letting this water cool, let's go ahead and just kind of look at this tea in here and notice notice how small these leaves are. When the Camellia sinensis plant, it's an evergreen shrub, it lays dormant through the winter time, and then in the spring, actually right now we are actually in the beginning of harvest season. Some teas have actually even already finished, but around this time is when the harvest seasons begin. And so this dormant plant starts to produce little buds, and they'll come out and they'll pick all these little buds, and that's going to be some of the highest priced tea. It's argued whether that's actually the highest quality, but the highest priced tea are often going to be from those young buds. And then as the season goes on, they're going to pick they're going to allow the leaves to mature a little bit more. In oolong production, they're actually going to do about 4 leaves down the stalk. But so these green teas are generally from that early part of the year, from pre-Qingming to about late April, so mid-March to late April. So green tea is going to be from almost always from those the young growth of the plant. Green tea is rarely ever from fully mature tea leaves. It's going to be from the young plant. And with this tea, actually, with Bilo Chun, when they pick the tea, they are then actually going to sit there and sort out the smaller leaves and use those leaves to make the Bilo Chun. In my post earlier today, there's a picture of this little girl that we walked into this room where they were making some tea, and there's this little girl sitting in the window sorting tea. So go check that out after the stream. It's one of my absolute favorite travel photos I've ever made. But so they're sorting even the smaller leaves to then produce this tea, and then they're going to throw it in the wok, and they're going to pull the leaves off the wok, roll it, and then pull it out. And so we got to watch them produce this tea, and it takes about 45 minutes. And so that's the simplicity of this tea: withering or picking, sorting, and then pan frying for about 45 minutes. Okay, so let's check our temperature here. And in that time frame, we reached where we need to be. So let's go ahead and pour. And remember, start with this side of the pot pouring method. And just, as always, just drop into this moment as we infuse. I generally like pretty short infusions, second infusions with my green tea, so I'm going to just pour this off. And so we're going to enjoy this infusion here. And so we could continue to re-infuse this multiple times. I like to take a gaiwan of tea, and I like to either go sit outside or sit in a side room. As some people have seen on my social media, I like to have tea with Mila, my baby. But just take some time to really drop into a tea session for about 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, and just really just keep brewing and taking in that moment. Obviously not in times like this, but it's also nice to bring friends together and just continue to infuse. But again, today we're just going to be doing 2 infusions per tea. Question: when they pan fry it for 45 minutes, is it over low heat? So yes, yes to everything. So both fire and electric. So I witnessed a fire. So the guy was on one side with the wok, and then his wife was on the other side feeding wood into a little fireplace, and it and so it starts at very high heat, and then they go into lower heat. But you also do see electric woks, so you kind of see it all these days. I was always wondered if that takes away the health benefits of the green tea. That's a good question. I would think that steaming green tea maybe holds some more of the catechins and the benefits. I honestly don't know. I'm not a scientist, so I try not to make health claims. So I haven't done, but there's research out there. But this book right here, The Tale of Tea. This is a really great book. He has a whole chapter on the health benefits of tea. It is huge. It is expensive, but has a lot of great information. And for Dober family out there, Yurka is actually mentioned in this book. It's pretty cool. But he talks a lot about the health benefits. But yes, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure about whether the heating takes away the health benefits. Okay, so let's move on to the final tea of the day, the sencha, and just continue to enjoy this last cup of tea here. People brewing at home, you're fine to use your gaiwan here. I'm going to, and so go ahead and clean out your gaiwan. I'm going to actually switch to another teapot here. I have this kyusu. It's a traditional Japanese side pour. I bought this in Shizuoka in Japan, and I absolutely love this teapot. This is just a great way to brew Japanese tea. The gaiwan will work, but I'm going to go ahead and just switch to this one just because I love it so much. But so to get into Japanese tea, let's go into some of the history of tea. I love the history of tea, so I could do 3 hours on this subject. So I'm gonna try to keep it short, and so stay with me on this one. But so let's go all the way back to the origins of Camellia sinensis. We say that Camellia sinensis is it's an evergreen shrub native to Southeast Asia, and oftentimes that people say that it's native to the Yunnan province of China. When we look deeper into understanding the origins of Camellia sinensis, we realize that it's not just the Yunnan. It's Yunnan province. It's parts of Sichuan, the Assam River Valley, northern Myanmar, northern Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. This whole subtropical belt is where Camellia sinensis is native to. That's its native region. In this book right here, the modern reader of the Classic of Tea, he talks about the prehistoric origins of tea. Really, really interesting. So in this region of Southeast Asia, back when millions of years ago, when the Indian subcontinent was down at the tip of Africa, you had early ancestors of Camellia sinensis growing in this region of Southeast Asia. And about 1 million years ago is when you start to see actual Camellia sinensis start to grow. And in this time, the Indian subcontinent starts to collide with the Eurasian subcontinent and starts to stratify the land. It created the Himalayas. And then in the foothills of the Himalayas down into Southeast Asia, you're starting to see parts of the land go up, parts of the land go down. And the Camellia sinensis that grows in these different parts, in the high elevation, you start to see smaller leaf, more cold hardy Camellia sinensis developing. And in the lower elevation, you start to see the Asamicas developing. And so in this time frame, about 1 million years ago, you start to see the development of different varieties of Camellia sinensis. So when did humans start to interact with tea? So the story goes, a man by the name of Shen Nong, about 4,500 years ago, the divine farmer, he would wander the countryside, tasting all the different plants and herbs and anything he could find, and he was cataloging these things. And it said that he was suffering from the poison of 72 different plants. And so he decided to sit underneath a tree and boil some water, and he fell asleep. And while he fell asleep, some leaves fell into his water, and these leaves were tea leaves. And when he woke, he drank the water with the boiled tea leaves, and he was suddenly cured of his poisons. This is where I always like to say that Dobra tea does not stand behind the idea that tea will cure you of poison. But that being said, this is the story told of the first human interaction with the tea plant. When we look more at this story from a historical standpoint, we start to see that this is probably just a myth. And the idea of the first human interaction with tea is not Shen Nong 4,500 years ago. When humans were coming up out of Africa and across into Southeast Asia, I would assume that they were when they reached Southeast Asia, they were interacting with Camellia sinensis. And so realistically, from about 1,000 to 3,500 years ago, you have humans starting to interact with Camellia sinensis. They first were eating Camellia sinensis, they would either pickle it or they would just eat it as just kind of, I guess, like a primitive salad, I suppose. But they were eating it, and then they began actually boiling the leaves with different vegetables and spices as a dietary supplement to add nutrients to their diet. And this is the beginning of humans drinking Camellia sinensis. When did humans start to cultivate the tea plant? The story is credited to a man by the name of Wu Li Zhen, and around in the Han Dynasty, around the time of Christ. Wu Li Zhen planted 7 tea trees on Mengding Mountain outside of Ya'an. You can actually visit his temple where they have the 7 tea trees still growing there. The West Side manager Gus has some really beautiful pictures of Wu Li Zhen's garden. So go to his social media and check out these beautiful photos. When we look at this story from a historical standpoint, we start to say, George Van Drem, as he says, the origins of tea are lost in the mist of time. So we can't, from a confident standpoint, say exactly when all these things happened, but around these times. So around the time of Christ is when humans started to cultivate the tea plant. So now fast forward to the Tang Dynasty in 780 AD with the writing of the Classic of Tea by Lu Yu. We now have the beginnings of tea culture. Tea goes from this folk medicine into the enjoyment of tea, the ceremony of tea, drinking tea for the pure joy of it. Lu Yu would often go off into the mountains with his friends, and they would prepare tea and write poetry, do calligraphy, talk about philosophy, and live in this kind of transcendental state induced by this tea. And so this is kind of the beginning of the enjoyment of tea culture. In the Classic of Tea, we have for the first time Lu Yu chronicling how to grow tea, how to make tea, the water quality necessary for tea, the utensils for tea. So for the first time, we have someone laying out the guidelines of making tea. And so in this time period, in the late Tang Dynasty, we have the establishment of tea culture. And so from there, we can then pivot to our next tea, our Japanese tea, because in this time period as well, in the late Tang Dynasty, specifically in 803 AD, we have 2 Japanese Buddhist monks, Kukai and Saicho, traveling to China to see Buddhism. And this was a big thing at the time for the Japanese looking to the Chinese to influence their culture. And so Kukai and Saicho travel to China to study in the Buddhist monasteries, and they return to Japan across the East China Sea, and they bring back with them ancient texts on Buddhism to develop their own forms of Buddhism in Japan. And then they bring back with them tea seeds. And so in the 9th century, you have the first establishment of tea drinking, but it doesn't really catch on until the late 12th century, when another monk by the name of Eisai travels to China and returns with tea plants. Eisai plants these tea plants in Kyushu Island in the south, and then he plants and he sends them up north to Kyoto in Kozanji Temple, and then the tea plants reach just south of Kyoto in Uji, in the Obuku Valley, in Uji Tawara. And to me, this is the true beginning of tea culture in Japan. So I'll go ahead and stop the history lesson there. As you can tell, I could keep going, but I'm going to stop there. And just as the establishment of tea in Japan in the 12th and 13th century. Next class we'll talk more about the Japanese tea ceremony, which developed in the following centuries. But from there, let's go ahead and jump into brewing our final tea, the sencha. So let's go ahead and start cooling our water here. Because with sencha, we're going to do 70 degrees. So sencha is going to be very delicate as well. So we're going to need 70 degrees. So we're going to get our water started to cool. And then let's go ahead and 4 grams. Japanese tea comes in these really beautiful packages. This is how they're sold on the streets of Japan. Really beautiful packaging. Let's get our 4 grams here. And so for those that have this tea at home, you're initially going to notice how different this tea looks. It's kind of hard to show on this camera, but very dark foresty green. That's because this tea is steamed. Again, you can see on the pictures I posted earlier of a machine where they will take the fresh leaves and they run through the machine for either 30 seconds to 90 seconds, and for a very high heat steaming to stop the oxidation. Because again, green tea is going to be unoxidized, and so the steaming is the method to stop the oxidation. So let's go ahead and throw this in our teapot here. And let's see where our water temperature is at. So my water is actually perfect because my kettle over here is off the size. It hasn't been boiled, so it's actually at a pretty good temperature here. If you need to take a little bit more time to lower your temperature, that's fine. Maybe try to toss it. But I'm ready to go here. And I'm going to go ahead and start my infusion of the sencha. And again, take this moment to just drop into the beauty of this moment. And again, sending love into your teapot, through the live stream to the world all around us. I think the world could use some love right now, so let's do our part to send it out and just drop in. And so when the Japanese pour their teapots, they're going to sit here and get every single drop out of the pot. And they'll stand here till the last drop. Here it comes. Falls. So go ahead and smell this teapot. You're going to immediately notice how different this pot is. Really, very, very bold aromatics. Japanese tea, when you steam the tea, it actually maintains a chemical that's also found in seaweed. So the oceanic flavor in this tea is actually because it shares a chemical with seaweed. So you are getting nice oceanic flavors to it. And correct. Nice color here. Nice. We're starting to get that chlorophyll-y green color here. Is that pot similar to the Yijing teapot? It's not. This teapot is different than Yijing because it's not porous on the inside. It's smooth on the inside. That would be the only difference. It's not going to like a porous Yijing. So yeah, let's go ahead and taste this sencha. Yep, Sarah, I'm glad I could validate that seaweed flavor. And Frank, yes, thank you for mentioning umami. That's a great term. Umami is a tasty note found in Japanese tea. Very beautiful, very kind of milky, grassy. They say fresh cut grass. Again, kind of sweet, but a little bit more bold, a little bit more in your face. Amazing. Japanese tea is kind of one of those teas that when you get into tea, one day it'll just click, and it's just, Japanese tea tends to have a cult following at the tea house. There's people that come in and just stock up on it. Okay, so really, really beautiful tea here. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to prepare the second infusion. I think by now you guys kind of gathered how to do the second infusion. So as I'm preparing the second infusion for the last infusion of the day, I'm just going to analyze that anyone had. There's probably a lag on where you're at on the presentation, but I'm just going to do my best. So if you have any questions. Sarah says, are all Japanese teas steamed? For the most part, yes. But there are one exception is the kama iricha. You often find this in the south in Kyushu Island. It is actually going to be pan-fried. And this is so when tea was first starting to be developed in Japan, it was pan-fried, just like the Chinese. And it wasn't until the 18th century when a man by the name of Nagatani Soyen in Ujitawara develops the steaming and rolling method of Japanese tea. So steaming Japanese tea is a relatively new practice, but now is basically is basically all that you find. So it is all that you find, but there are exceptions like the kami iricha. We did, when we were in Shizuoka, we did visit a factory that was producing Japanese pu'er, or Japanese fermented tea, if you want to be a little bit more accurate. Really, really interesting tea. We would love to offer it in the tea house one day, but that was, Japanese fermented tea, Japanese pu'er. But for the most part, yes, Japanese teas are going to be all steamed. Any other questions? Well, so one thing before we go with the second infusion here. So with Japanese teas in that second infusion, you're going to want to do that second infusion very short. They'll do their infusions for about maybe even like 10 to 15 seconds. So you have your water at your temperature, and you're going to pour your water on. And basically just water off. So it's really just water on, water off. And you'll see just how quickly that second infusion darkens of that infusion. Catherine asks, what are the fuzzy bits on Bilochun? So the fuzzy bits are the downiness from the tips. A really interesting experience when we were in Dongshan watching this guy produce the tea for 45 minutes. He was tossing the leaves, and it was interesting because the leaves were staying really green. I was like, is this tea not going to have that fuzziness that's usually found in Bilochun? And then it was really bizarre. Suddenly, in the last 5 minutes of this 45-minute production, all of a sudden the tea just turned that silvery, fuzzy color. I honestly can't really explain. I don't really know, and I don't really know why some tea fuzz like Bilochun and some don't. I'm going to guess, this is a guess, that with this kind of pulling of it, because you do find the fuzz in stuff like Mengding Lu and other teas like that, and our Dian Lo Shan has that, but not to the extent of Bilochun, but when you have kind of a pulling of the leaves, you're going to maintain that fuzziness. But things like Longjing, when you're pressing it, it's not going to be as fuzzy. But you still actually will, in those young, in like very young tea, you will find some of that fuzz. Ray, have you read why the Japanese started steaming in the 18th century? I'm honestly not quite sure. The jumping off point for that would be to just study more of Nagatani Soyen and the Uji method. I'm gonna agree with you on the preference for the umami taste. I think it started to produce this nice umami flavor. But the full answer, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite exactly sure why they switched over. It could be maybe economic reasons. Tea, and we'll talk this next time. Tea in the Tong, Song, and Ming, and up into the Ming Dynasty, and then in Japan, in the most of its history, you were having pressed tea, and then you were drinking powdered tea, which would have been pan fried and then compressed and then powdered. And so possibly, this is just a guess again, that Nagatani Soyen was developing the Uji method of production to transition out of simply just matcha, because just in that time, in the development of Chanoyu, in tea, you're only drinking powdered tea and matcha, and the Japanese tea ceremony was such an intensive method to drink tea. My guess is that in the time of Nagatani Soyen and Bai Sao is another person to look into, they developed a sencha-do method of loose leaf tea, and where you can drink it more like this rather than a ceremonial practice. And that's my guess. So, Michael, if you wait 5 to 10 minutes in between infusions, No, that's fine. I mean, the only thing to worry about with leaving leaves uh, in your teapot is mold, but that's more of like a multi-day wait. So that's actually a good way that you can brew tea if you have a teapot or a gaiwan. Is you can have it on your kitchen counter or at your tea table, and just throughout your day you can just keep dipping into your tea and just keep drinking. Just come back to it, and it just keeps giving. A lot of the caffeine is extracted in about the first 2 minutes of infusion time. So in the first couple infusions, you're extracting most of the caffeine, but if caffeine is not a concern, the flavor is still going to be there. So you can wait 5 to 10 minutes. That's totally fine. Any other questions? Well, all right. I'm sure with the lag of the video, a question's going to come up after I come off here. But thank you all so much for joining me today. This is a really special event for me, tapping into the world of digital tea classes. I really appreciate it. Thank you all to the people out there that bought tea samples and brewed along with me. And that is wanting tea samples, just direct message me and I can send them out to you. If you need any teaware or anything, just let me know. Gus asked, "Will you document me now?" Hopefully one day. I do have a dream making a documentary, visiting the sites of these 9th century Japanese monks in the 9th century traveled to China. I have a dream of visiting these sites and going to the original gardens of Japan and the sites of the production of tea in Japan. So I don't know. I mean, first off, we need to be able to travel internationally again. So we'll start. New 3 comments. What is this? All right. Well, I'm gonna stop here. So thank you all so much. So everyone out there, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, practice that social distancing, and yeah, I'll see you all next week. Thank you.